Thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez for helping to support the channel. What makes a good person? Who is the judge of morality? How would you feel if you realised you have a lot in common with your greatest enemy? These are the types of philosophical questions Doctor Who tries to answer in the Series 8 episode Into the Dalek. The narrative shrinks the main characters down to a microscopic size in order to explore and fix one of the universe's biggest villains, posing all sorts of ethical questions and moral dilemmas. It's a fascinating episode set to the backdrop of a sprawling outer space war. It deconstructs the main character himself, along with taking up the difficult challenge of trying to make the Daleks interesting and scary again. But how does it achieve all these goals? What exactly is it about Into the Dalek that works so exceptionally and sets it apart from previous stories also trying to explore the villains? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. So, without any further ado, let's head into darkness.
Tell me, am I a good man?
Let's face it, the Daleks are oversaturated. They show up constantly because of how reliable they are as a way to pop ratings and sell toys. Because everyone knows the Daleks, they're iconic for a reason. This means that Dalek stories need to be even more notable and stand out than your run-of-the-mill Doctor Who narratives. But despite this, it's rare for a Dalek story to be considered the best of a series. Ever since Series 1, the episodes focusing around these monsters have often been overshadowed by other narratives, which in turn has devalued the Daleks and made them less scary than they were in years gone by. It was almost fitting then that Into the Dalek was the first episode since Nightmare in Silver that wasn't some kind of big event. We'd had a series finale, a huge climactic anniversary special, a regeneration special, and then a feature-length series opener introducing a new Doctor. So Into the Dalek was essentially given the unenviable task of bringing the show back down to earth and returning to the norm, which is the kind of episode slot no writer ever wants to tackle. However, showrunner Stephen Moffat was keen to re-establish the menace of the villains, so he drew upon one of his own potential ideas for 2010's adventure games. Before City of the Daleks was created, one of the early plans was a narrative where the player becomes miniaturized and infiltrates a Dalek casing, allowing for fans to run around inside of the show's most iconic and infamous villain. But in a classic Grand Moff move, he then realised this was actually too good for just a mere video game. So he decided to work with Waters of Mars and Sarah Jane Adventures writer Phil Ford to bring the concept to life. This kind of miniaturization concept is nothing new for science fiction. Indeed, all the way back in 1966, the movie Fantastic Voyage won 2 Oscars for its art direction and special effects, as a submarine crew found themselves shrunk in order to repair a blood clot in a scientist. Even Doctor Who had played with this kind of concept before, with 1977's The Invisible Enemy being inspired by Fantastic Voyage, seeing the Doctor and Leela create small clones of themselves to battle the villainous nucleus of the swarm, which has infected the Doctor. The serial kind of sucks, but it'll always have a soft spot for me because the novelization was one of the first Doctor Who books I ever read. Anyway, to get back on track, Phil Ford set out to make his Dalek miniaturization story very different from these 2 inspirations, and I think he succeeds in this. The episode thankfully glosses over all the technology behind the shrinking and unshrinking, because, there's no point getting bogged down in all of those details. It's easier just to say, yeah, they can shrink people, it's a thing they can do. This frees up more time to just focus on the exploration concept and get on with the adventure, because the idea is interesting enough to stand on its own 2 feet without a lot of setup behind it. Because yeah, it's an incredible concept.
Fantastic idea for a movie. Terrible idea for a proctologist.
It's unprecedented to quite literally travel inside of a Dalek. We've seen the mutants inside the casing on many occasions, but it's a fascinating twist to see it all on a microscopic level, shining new light on the villains and changing things up. It reminds me a lot of Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, with such a familiar aspect of the show expanded and turned it into a thrilling claustrophobic setting in and of itself. We're so used to Daleks and we're so used to running down corridors, but it's a masterstroke to combine the 2 so that the corridors are the Daleks. It completely transforms what we thought we knew and director Ben Wheatley consistently adds to the feeling of claustrophobia and intensity. There's a delightfully surreal visual of the protagonist entering the eye stalk, with trippy, watery visuals immediately showing you the new scale and how much bigger everything is now, something constantly emphasized throughout as you see the shell casing and grille from the inside, giving a really interesting new perspective on such a familiar foe. The episode truly looks phenomenal, with the camera work leading to a bunch of creative and interesting angles, giving the industrial location a lot of freshness and variety, so it never feels boring or dull. The antagonistic antibodies also help to make the setting feel alive. These roaming drones that look like the eye stalks. With the wrong direction and effects, these would be really goofy and unthreatening, like the Cyberman drones in Ascension of the Cybermen, but this episode handles them sublimely, so they genuinely come across as intimidating threats as they evilly vaporize characters. All this chaos and terror, both visually and narratively, creates a sense of Rusty's insides being some kind of twisted Willy Wonka factory of hell. So I think the episode does deliver on the marketing that the inside of the Dalek is indeed the most dangerous place in the universe. If the idea of a single chained up Dalek seems a bit familiar to you, that would be because Phil Ford consciously took a lot of inspiration from 2005's episode Dalek. Knowing the obvious similarities, Ford decided to differentiate his narrative by adding a larger threat rather than just the lone villain. Indeed, the episode opens with a fun and action-packed race for survival as Journey Blue tries to escape the grasp of a fully armed Dalek saucer. I love how small her ship looks in comparison, introducing a sense of cosmic scale and stakes, the villains looming so dominantly over the humans who are hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, even in the bigger Aristotle ship. The saucer even brushes off asteroids and meteors with ease, emphasizing that sheer strength of the Daleks as a universal superpower. Of course, luckily for Journey Blue, the Doctor saves her in the nick of time, which is more proof that he really didn't care about Adric back when he died in a crashing spaceship. But I digress. The tension of the closed-off Rusty setting is perfectly juxtaposed by this expansive space setting with action, which makes the episode and the world bigger and more packed than it actually is. These set pieces remind me a lot of Davis-era stories, emphasising the brutality of the monsters, and the glimpse at an outer space conflict is realistic because of how prominent both races are in the universe. Parting of the Ways hinted at a long history between them, but this is the first time in the modern show that we really get a sense of them properly fighting across the stars outside of Earth itself. Indeed, the episode culminates in a big invasion of the Aristotle, which is probably the weakest part of the episode, but as the Star Wars nerd I am, I appreciate the New Hope homage as the soldiers prepare for the attack, creating a tense atmosphere of hopeless dread. Hell, there's even some Star Wars influence in the music of the episode during these scenes, which is fun. Exterminate the humans! Seek, locate, destroy! So all in all, despite how obvious and derivative it seems, this space warfare aspect is actually fresh and new for the Daleks and the show itself, so it's some delightful world building. Speaking of world building, an often overshadowed part of Into the Dalek is its introduction of brand new character Danny Pink, whose appearances bookend the story. He's a new teacher at Coal Hill, and he's immediately established as a romantic interest for Clara, who isn't planning on bonking the Doctor anymore. Clara and Danny's relationship is very grounded and normal right from the get-go, with an awkward interaction as Clara tries to joke at Danny's expense, only for it to go horribly wrong. I think this is because she's so used to her life with the Doctor and forgets how cold and twisted her sense of humour has become thanks to him. She doesn't even realise she does stuff like this, showing how her personality is changing and shifting. I also think it's fun to see how Danny completely misses Clara's obvious hints, which is incredibly relatable. I did that with my own girlfriend. I love how the scene cuts between their conversation and Danny later running it back in his head and saying what he should have said, like being in the shower and coming up with the perfect responses to an argument earlier in the week. It's excellent human storytelling, a natural and simple love story we can all get behind with ease. The show had never really done this kind of boy meets girl narrative before, especially not in the modern era. Sure, you could point to couples like Joe and Cliff Jones and Leela and Andred, but I feel like those were more cold and emotionless because they were just simply narrative tools. They interact a few times and then suddenly they get together by the end, which feels very rushed and very forced because they only exist to write the character out. However, thanks to Danny's backstory and Clara's already developed character, the beginnings of their relationship already feel a lot more realistic. Almost like some sort of workplace rom-com interrupted by evil pepper pots. Hey, if any show could do it, it would be Doctor Who. Another refreshing element of Danny Pink is how he's established as vulnerable without being pathetic or comically cowardly like Mickey and Rory were previously. Sure, he's a bit socially awkward and emotional, but it's not played for comedy. Instead, it serves as a commentary on the real-life struggles former soldiers face as they try to readjust to life after serving in conflict. Everyone treats Danny like he's some kind of macho tough man because of his past, but you can see how he still feels the weight of his service and wants to turn it into something positive. It's a solid foundation for the character, with Danny's tears showing us the vulnerability underneath, rather than it being a joke to emasculate him. It's a powerful reminder that yes, men can be very fragile and emotional too, without it making them any less masculine. There's an intriguing scene as a student asks Danny if he's ever killed a man, which is the exact kind of thoughtless and unempathetic question a child would ask. So I appreciate how Danny tries to answer it in a very neutral and matter-of-fact way. However, because children are the worst, most despicable creatures in the entire universe, the kid keeps pushing, which naturally causes Danny to recall a civilian he killed. Considering we later find out it was a child, it makes a lot of sense that Danny would live in perpetual guilt and torment. It's almost like he's becoming a teacher to atone for this killing and seek some level of forgiveness. So there are a lot of layers to it. He's trying to help these kids to make up for the one whose life he ended. Obviously, I'm not going to touch the can of worms that is the idea of soldiers killing civilians because that's not what my channel is about. But there are obviously parallels between Danny and the Doctor himself. Firstly, previous episodes had mused that the Doctor tries to save people to make up for the death toll of the Time War, so you can see that in Danny as he tries to help make these kids' lives better. Secondly, the parallels exist because Series 8 sees the Doctor grappling with whether he should be able to consider himself a good man after all the death he has caused. Into the Dalek is the first proper episode of the 12th Doctor. Now you might not know what I mean by that because Deep Breath introduced the character and gave him his first full episode. However, it was a post-regeneration story all about handling the transition between Doctors and addressing the viewer's concerns about the change. It was an introductory episode in every single way, with the Doctor spending most of the narrative experiencing post-regeneration madness as he tried to work out who he is. So Into the Dalek is really the first episode with the 12th Doctor in full force with consistent characterization, starting the episode fully aware of who he is, although by the end he's not exactly sure what kind of person he is. Peter Capaldi is once again fantastic in this episode, continuing his exceptional portrayal of the Doctor, full of snarky and sarcastic witty remarks.
You're not a young woman anymore.
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's right. Keep your spirits up.
He's very fun, and his grumpiness is appealing for dry comedy, creating a different tone of humour in contrast to the ADHD blabbering of the 10th and 11th Doctors. The 12th Doctor has a brash and blunt sense of pompousness not unlike the 6th Doctor. He considers himself above everyone else, regularly explaining things in a grandiose way to show off, before then turning around and mocking everyone else for not getting it. And this works well with this episode's supporting cast, particularly because he's working with Clara, a teacher, and soldiers, who he is shown to absolutely hate. Guest characters are always hard to get right, since in the span of just 45 minutes, you have to introduce and flesh out a temporary character who will never show up again. However, Journey Blue is a really good example of a one-off character done right. This brave and heroic soldier thrown in at the deep end at the beginning of the episode having to deal with the death of her brother Kai. This is a simple yet effective way of establishing a character, killing off a loved one to give them personal stakes. It's tried and true. It's the same for the pair's uncle Morgan Blue, who is the commander of the Aristotle, giving the supporting characters a relatable family element, especially with how common it is in the real world to have military families like this. I do wish Morgan had a bit more screen time in this episode because Michael Smiley is a really good actor, but he doesn't really get much to do here. His amazing acting is shown in a great early confrontation between his character and the Doctor aboard the Aristotle, with the two butting heads over Morgan's paranoia of Dalek spies.
Oh, it's a roller coaster with you, isn't it?
However, Journey is the main side character, a human anchor who also gets given companion potential, the end hinting at her joining the Doctor and Clara, but she is promptly rejected, making her the second fresh meat actor to unsuccessfully become a companion. Hacking megalomaniac, morally grey soldier, Dalek hybrid thing, evil wisecracking robot. Yeah, they don't have the best track record. Poor Shona though, she just woke up too quick. Journey would make a good addition to the TARDIS team, but her rejection is a good way to introduce the 12th Doctor's disdain of soldiers.
Command ship, which is currently positioned.
No, come on. Not like that. Not like that. Get it right.
He even admits to Journey that her nature as a soldier is the only reason he won't take her in the TARDIS. It was actually a late addition to the script, but I think it does a really good job of laying the foundation for his complicated relationship with Danny, and how the Doctor is almost projecting his self-hatred onto these soldiers. He hates himself for what he did as a soldier and a warrior, so he refuses to see the good in others because he assumes that they are all just as bad and ethically flawed as himself.
You don't like soldiers much, do you?
You don't need to be like you with all the guns.
The 12th Doctor is very calm and collected, which is great for those comedic PG Malcolm Tucker remarks, but it also shows how cold he's capable of being, not allowing his emotions to get in the way of his objective. There's a stark and scary darkness lurking underneath this incarnation, something we see throughout this narrative with his interactions with the soldiers. It's especially shocking when he casually allows Ross to die because he sees it as an advantage.
I thought you were saving him!
He was dead already. I'm saving us.
The Doctor doesn't try to save Ross, he doesn't seek some kind of solution like past Doctors would, and he doesn't even express sympathy at the death. He just uses it as part of his plan, manipulating and exploiting Ross, which feels perfectly un-Doctor-like, especially because he asks Ross to trust him shortly before condemning him to death and using the soldier as a way to get further in their mission. Although, unfortunately for Ross, he doesn't seem to get to go to heaven like Gretchen does. Gretchen is another soldier, but she doesn't really get developed. However, this doesn't make her heroic self-sacrifice any less dramatic, giving her own life so that Clara and Journey can save the day. I do wish she'd have had more development to make this moment hit harder, but it's a strong moment as she requests for the Doctor to do something nice and name it after her, because she wants to help him find goodness in himself. It's a good use of a doomed side character, especially as she finds herself in heaven with Missy, just like the half-faced man did. It's a very short cutaway, but it continues to build the ongoing intrigue around this mysterious new character and the concept of heaven being real, this time a quaint and sugary tea party. Maybe Ross was diabetic and went to the pool instead. Even though Gretchen's death shows this more obvious use of a side character's death, Ross's death serves as a glimpse behind the curtain of the Doctor himself, hinting at this hatred and callousness underneath.
A man has just died. You will not talk like that!
Because this is what the episode is about. It's not just about exploring the inside of the Dalek, it's about what's hiding underneath the Doctor too, which we see as Rusty sees inside the Doctor's soul. Yes, let's talk about Rusty, the titular Dalek who is being entered by the protagonists. The humans found him drifting and dying, so naturally they chained him up because he's starting to question his own existence. Hey, don't worry Rusty, we've all been there. Although maybe not the being chained up and penetrated part. But for real, I do love the reveal of Rusty all chained up and asking for the Doctor's help. The concept of the Doctor helping his biggest enemies is far from new, but it's always great to see the reluctance and abject horror in the Doctor's eyes as he's faced with the prospect of needing to help a Dalek.
Why would I do that? Why would any living creature help you?
This episode makes the idea of him helping his villains feel different because it focuses on whether it's even possible for there to be a good Dalek. Since the Doctor has always insisted it's a scientific impossibility, because evil and hatred is hard-coded into their very DNA and being.
A good Dalek?
There's no such thing.
However, he's still drawn in by the idea, partly hoping that a good Dalek is possible, and also I guess deep down wanting to be validated that it is impossible. Although personally I'd love for it to be true, and we get to see Rusty retire to live in a lovely thatched cottage with a robot dog, baking cakes together, and attending regular meetings of the Skaro Birdwatching Society. The reason Rusty has gone rogue and hates the Daleks is because he's seen the beauty of life, Daleks exist to destroy, it's all they know, and they see beauty in death and destruction. But Rusty saw the birth of a star, realizing that despite all the destruction, life still returns and other stars are born. It's the kind of optimistic logic you'd usually expect from the Doctor, which, helps to draw parallels between the two. It's almost unheard of for Daleks to actively learn something positive without it being some kind of technicality that they can use to kill.
What did you say?
The birth of a star.
This is genuine and real. Even though this sense of morality and understanding of beauty comes from a malfunction, that experience of seeing the beauty of the star is still real. Rusty actually felt that of his own accord. The radiation leak just expanded his mind so that he could embrace the power of positivity.
But what it saw, what it felt, it's still there.
So even when the radiation leak is fixed and the Dalek becomes evil again, it's not completely lost. However, the slight catch is obviously that now the characters have to deal with a Dalek on the loose, zapping people in the usual fashion. It becomes an interesting race against time, a base under siege, but with the protagonist actually inside the invading monster, which is a unique way of shaking things up. However, the real focus is on the Doctor's prejudice. He's so confident that Daleks are utterly incapable of goodness that he refuses to hear any differently.
There was never a good Dalek. There was a broken Dalek and we repented.
This is where Clara comes in. Her role as a companion is changing and shifting to match the Doctor's new characterization. The 12th Doctor is reckless and cold at times, his detachment putting people in danger without him realizing the extent of his actions. This means that Clara has to step up as a sort of moral compass.
I'm Miss Kara.
Yeah, my Kara. She can, so I don't have to.
Obviously this is a fun quip, but it's also the perfect summary of their new dynamic. Clara is forced into the position of injecting humanity into the Doctor. This is nothing new for the companions, who have always had this kind of purpose. Their very human feelings and decisions help to anchor the Doctor and guide them towards the best decisions for themselves and others. However, Clara has to do this more than others, even having to slap some sense and empathy into the Doctor during this episode. I know this scene has always been used as ammo for people's anti-Clara bandwagon, or evidence for Moffat being some kind of evil man-hating SJW, but in truth it's just the companion calling the Doctor out for doing the wrong thing and having such a narrow worldview and prejudice.
We're gonna die in here. And there was a little bit of you that's pleased.
This slap scene is genuinely just a literal example of Clara becoming confident enough to call the Doctor out like this, hardening as a character. I think the changing relationship between the Doctor and Clara flips their teacher-student dynamic on its head as Clara begins to channel her teaching job into these interactions. The Doctor isn't an absolute moral authority and Clara represents that, because she can find the right answers too, and even sometimes seek better outcomes than the Doctor himself would. The interpersonal conflict isn't a way of tearing down the Doctor, it's instead a way of building Clara up and showing her value, how her own intelligence and ability can fill in the gaps where the Doctor's lack of morality falls short. It draws them closer together and continues to sow the seeds for their toxic, dependent relationship, because they literally cannot reach the best outcomes without each other's influence. They need to be a team, and this episode shows that very clearly.
That means a good Dalek is possible. That's what we learned today. Am I right, Teach?
Top of the class.
Into the Dalek establishes some distance between the Doctor and Clara, opening with the reveal that Clara has had to wait 3 weeks for the coffee she was promised at the end of Deep Breath. It's a nice way to continue the recurring gag of the Doctor's poor time management skills, despite, him literally being a Time Lord. It's a fun joke, but it also continues the evolution of the pair's relationship since Series 7B. During Clara's time with the 11th Doctor, it was an ongoing thing that he would basically show up a couple of times a week, take her off on adventures before dropping her back off at home, and she'd basically go right back to normal life. However, Into the Dalek shows how the gaps between their adventures are getting even longer, because the Doctor is just popping in and out of her life every now and then, rather than her always being with him and losing control like Amy and Rory did. I feel like this is a conscious decision by the Doctor, because he doesn't want Clara to make those same life management mistakes. He wants to give her more space to live a normal life sometimes, but as we later find out throughout the series, their relationship is too close to actually allow this to happen, with those same adventure-life balance issues coming up and weaving themselves into the wider story arc of the pair, because they can never stay away from each other no matter how hard they try. But I'll get to that later on in the series.
You're not my boss. boss. You're one of my hobbies.
All of these issues and concerns about the Doctor's morality culminate as he confronts Rusty eye to eye. Literally, because, he's there with the mutant. Capaldi has an absolutely fantastic monologue about his history with the villains, but the true gold comes as he implores Rusty to remember the beauty of the star. It feels like a very triumphant and climactic moment, the Doctor plugging himself into the very brain of the mutant in order to influence it into embracing morality.
I'm part of you. My mind is in your mind.
It's an excellent idea, the Doctor literally transposing his own love for the universe into the Dalek, showing it all the beauty he himself has witnessed and experienced over as many years. However, in his flawed wisdom, the Doctor makes a fatal error, because he overlooks his own hatred inside. It's all there deep down, even if he just shuts it away like Rusty's positive memories were. Moffat loved to play with the idea of the Doctor having a deep darkness inside, and that kind of stuff comes to fruition in this episode as he's forced to confront it firsthand. Into the Dalek is a very Pyrrhic victory for the Doctor, something underlined by the almost somber music as Rusty wipes out his own kind and the Doctor begs for the Dalek to see the good in him. It's fascinating, once again showing why a companion like Clara is so important, because she keeps him safe from his own inner darkness. It's definitely surreal and bizarre to see this killing spree at the hands of a Dalek itself, but it harkens back to stories like Remembrance of the Daleks, where my beloved special weapons Dalek showed up and just wrecked shop. He was crazy and took no prisoners. What a guy. And just as a side note, I also love the trivia fact that Peter Capaldi wasn't actually due to work the day they filmed the sequence of all the exploding Daleks, but he still showed up to watch it anyway, even though it was his day off. Stuff like this really makes you appreciate just how much Capaldi loves the show and how big of a fan he is. What a guy. Rusty wiping out his own kind isn't a good result for the Doctor because he hasn't created a good Dalek. He's just turned the alien into a different type of prejudiced killer, polluting it with his own hatred for the Daleks.
Of course they are. That's what you do, isn't it?
This line is poignant because it's a lack of self-awareness from the Doctor. He laments at his failure to create a good Dalek, but he seems to completely overlook how destroying the Daleks is what he himself does. He misses the mirror being held up to him by Rusty.
You are a good Dalek.
It's not just a big show-offy Moffat line with gravitas, it says a lot about the Doctor and his unforgiving approach to dealing with his biggest enemy, especially in this incarnation particularly. Because yes, 12 is cold, calculating and prejudiced, and Scottish. He has a hard logic that bears a lot of similarities to the Daleks, adopting this very black and white worldview of good and evil. Just look at his sacrifice of Ross for tactical gain. That's exactly the kind of decision a Dalek would make. So it's fantastic that we get these parallels throughout, questioning the Doctor's morality by showing how similar he is to his own greatest enemy. But there is a key difference. Something Clara points out at the very end. We don't know if the 12th Doctor is a good man, but he at least tries to be, and that's what counts. He doesn't need a glitch in his software to make him good, he's already fully capable of it, in the same way Rusty embraced beauty of his own accord. The Doctor's arc in this episode reminds me a lot of the Marcus Aurelius quote at the beginning of Day of the Doctor. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The Doctor needs to stop worrying about whether he is a good man. He should just, try to be one. Into the Dalek is by far the best Dalek story of the Moffat era. It really pushes the boundaries of the villains, repairing their reputation with this thrilling dive into the unknown. It seamlessly crams so much into one incredibly entertaining episode of Doctor Who. It has everything you could want: witty charms, space battles, Daleks wiping out humans, and an interesting character exploration of the Doctor himself. It's so fun, yet so deep and philosophical too, with its questions about morality. So there's something there for all different types of viewers. I do think the side characters could have done with a little bit more depth, but Journey Blue is a good companion who never was, and her existence helps to establish the foundations of the Doctor's disdain for soldiers, similar to the introduction of Danny Pink himself. The visuals of the episode are breathtaking, with the direction and staging work bringing Rusty's insides to life in a very striking and compelling way. Both Capaldi and Coleman once again hit it out of the park with their chemistry as the Doctor and Clara, continuing to build upon their character dynamics, with the pair constantly challenging each other to become better and stronger as people within this crazy, unpredictable world. Into the Dalek easily gets an A rank on the Series 8 tier list. It's a delightful episode of Doctor Who that pushes boundaries and tries new things, maintaining the momentum of Deep Breath and continuing the trend towards high concept experimental narratives. So then, what's next?
No such thing as Robin Hood.
Oh, hi Mark. And a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Platinum level patrons Maximilian Foreman and Nick's Games, and my Gold level patrons Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Luke_SY, Tom Azar, and Tifa Simp. Thank you so much for your support.